One of the main people who is in his administration, you can read her tweets, and there are many crazy ones, like just home ownership is racist, even though something like 40 million black people own homes.
Yes.
Okay, but also she'd vote more communists. I'm not paraphrasing.
Yes.
Vote more, and he stood by her.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have to read between the lines here.
And the Democrats, my God, please find somebody who can lead. Gavin Newsom is out here in California. Out here in California. Pulling off in his own way what I think he wants to. He's being known more for trolling Trump on his podcast or with other interviews than what he's actually doing in the state of California. They think that's leadership.
Bill Maher has once again taken direct aim at the Democratic Party's post-election strategy, and his comments highlight contradictions that are becoming increasingly hard to ignore. Since their major defeat in the last election, the DNC has launched one comeback attempt after another, shifting messaging, reworking narratives, and trying multiple resets to regain momentum. However, none of these efforts seem to be landing effectively, neither with voters nor with the media, and in some cases not even with their own base. On a recent episode of his long-running show, Maher breaks down why these repeated strategies appear to be falling apart, pointing toward deeper structural and messaging issues that surface-level changes can't fix.
What the Democrats are not doing with this is leading. The energy in their parties with the young people who learn everything about Israel on TikTok. They don't know shit. And their leaders are not standing up and saying, kids, you don't know what's going on here. Every war Israel has fought is a war of defense.
Right.
Every war, they were attacked first. And they're not.
Maher's read on the situation is blunt. He argues that one of the Democratic Party's biggest failures is its reluctance to be fully transparent with younger voters, and he sees this as more than just a simple messaging gap. In his view, the party isn't only missing the mark, but may also be shaping a partial and one-sided understanding of reality for an entire generation. He points to selective narratives, key omissions, and emotionally driven framing as part of how the broader conversation is influenced and controlled. Maher also claims that younger audiences are often exposed to simplified versions of history and global affairs that leave out important context, which can significantly change how events are interpreted. His main argument is that if political leaders were more committed to balanced, fact-based explanations, younger voters would develop a more critical and grounded perspective instead of immediately aligning with movements. From his standpoint, this goes beyond outreach problems and reflects a deeper credibility issue that continues to grow and impact the party's direction over time.
It would have to be with traditional and conventional Democrats. Let's have just a speck of empathy for them in this regard. You got a younger generation of progressive Democrats that pretty much are making their influence felt. And then you've got the old guard that are at the mercy of them. They want to maintain power. And you want to sit up, you got to receive votes. Look at what happened in New York City. No disrespect, but do we really think that Zohran Mamdani was the most qualified candidate to be mayor of New York City? Come on now, we know better. I'm wishing him well. I'm not being disrespectful. He's smart, he's sharp, he's quick on his feet. I'm not disrespecting him in any way. But he had never done anything. You got a governor, a former governor, who was a 3-term governor, coasting to his fourth before the scandal hit. You boot him out of office. He's qualified to get.
And that brings us to a decision that raised a lot of eyebrows. Zohran Mamdani was, as Stephen A. Smith also noted, still relatively early in his political career when he was elevated to a leading position in a high-stakes mayoral race, a move critics say is bold for someone without a long track record on that scale. Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo had already served 3 terms as governor and was widely seen as a seasoned, high-profile political figure before his career was derailed by controversies and his resignation amid allegations. Critics argue that after he left office, much of the public momentum around those controversies faded, and the issue gradually moved out of the daily political spotlight. Despite that, instead of revisiting a more experienced but controversial figure whose reputation had already cooled in public discourse, attention shifted toward Mamdani, a newer political name with a comparatively shorter record. From there, critics say the contrast becomes difficult to ignore, raising broader questions about strategic choices, internal priorities, and whether political experience still carries the same weight it once did.
3 terms en route to 4 to run the state. But you don't want to run in the city. And you're going to hand the reins to a 33-year-old
he's also a communist.
Okay.
I mean, and I'm not saying that as a slur.
All right.
I'm saying that's his political view. It's a view you're allowed to have in this country, and people are allowed to vote for it.
So you have people that don't mind that, and they want that in this country. And unfortunately, if you're a Chuck Schumer or some of the old guards, you're at the mercy of all of that, still trying to stay in office, knowing that you got voters out there that would support that.
Some critics argue that a portion of younger, left-leaning supporters within the Democratic Party are being drawn to ideas that they associate with communism or socialism, largely because of how certain political ideals are presented and framed in modern messaging. They claim that these ideas are often discussed in terms of fairness, equality, and reform, while the historical and real-world outcomes of communist systems receive less emphasis in popular discourse. From this perspective, experienced political leaders such as Chuck Schumer are seen by some as voices who could play a stronger role in grounding these debates by providing clearer historical context, economic comparisons, and explanations of why the United States has traditionally favored capitalist systems over communist ones. Supporters of this view argue that stronger educational framing from established leaders could help younger voters better understand complex political ideologies in a broader historical and global context. Without that type of context, critics warn that younger audiences may engage with these ideas in a more abstract or idealized way, without fully considering the practical outcomes seen in different systems throughout history.
The main people who is in his administration, you can read her tweets, and there are many crazy ones, like just home ownership is racist, even though something like 40 million black people own homes.
Yes.
Okay, but also she'd vote more communists. I'm not paraphrasing. Yes. Vote more, and he stood by her.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have to read between the lines here.
Yes. Then turning around and asking the president for $21 billion.
Well, I mean, as the person who said Democrats are too weak and woke, I think that's your quote. I mean, this has got to be what you're.
Ma is tapping into what critics say is a real and growing perception that the Democratic Party often appears indecisive, overly cautious, reactive, and too easily influenced by the loudest voices within its own coalition. They argue this perception didn't appear suddenly, but has developed over years of the party showing hesitation in directly challenging more polarizing positions from within its ranks. According to this view, that reluctance has created an internal vacuum where more extreme or less mainstream ideas can gain traction without consistent debate or pushback. While no one disputes that the party prioritizes values like equality and social justice, critics say tension emerges when those goals are linked with economic positions seen as drifting away from the political center. They point out that most American voters still broadly support a free market capitalist system as the foundation of the economy, and argue that this consensus remains stable. From this perspective, if the party continues to move further from that center of gravity, the risk is not only losing moderate voters, but also destabilizing its broader coalition. In a political environment where perception can shift faster than policy, they warn that such a drift could have serious consequences at the ballot box.
I do think what you're getting at is, and I feel this when I travel, particularly in the middle of the country, like, it is hard to miss as an elected leader that people are so desperate for some kind of change. Like the young people in particular will either take it from you nicely, or they will eventually kick down the door. It's just a matter of figuring out which one is going to come first. And I think the old guard has not yet caught up to the fact that the game that they learned to play, it's a totally different game now. It is a totally different operation, and they haven't adapted and they haven't left. And so no matter where you go, I think Mamdani is a New York City thing. I don't think that would work in other places.
It's true that many young people are calling for significant change, but critics argue that embracing communism is not the solution they should be turning to. Echoing earlier concerns, they say the real issue isn't the demand for change itself, but the lack of grounded context shaping how that desire is formed. In their view, more experienced political voices within the Democratic Party need to play a stronger role in explaining America's foreign policy decisions and the foundations of its economic system in a clear, historically informed way. Without that foundation, critics argue, younger audiences are often left piecing together their understanding from fragmented or incomplete sources. One of the biggest concerns they raise is the growing reliance on platforms like TikTok, where complex political, historical, and economic topics are frequently condensed into short, emotionally driven clips. When issues are reduced to that format, they argue nuance is often lost, leading to a surface-level understanding rather than a fully developed one. From this perspective, many young people may not be missing the desire to understand, but rather the depth of context needed to fully grasp what they are being shown.
I think it's a symptom of a bigger issue, which is the old guard of politics. It's done. It's over. It doesn't work anymore, and it's certainly, on my side of the aisle, not playing effective offense against Donald Trump.
And yet, there are things to be learned from Mamdani. You can take politics aside, policy aside. Very few Democrats, very few Republicans, I can't think of many, who have been able to insult, disparage, and go at Trump and still sometimes get results that are favorable for the people we represent with Trump's blessing.
For sure.
And part
Because
of
he had him to the Oval Office.
Well, but whatever, he had the fake kid, the headline that he gave him, and the different things.
You.
I mean, it's not
the
that.
guy is, it's all about personal with him.
Yes.
It
He's
is.
not, Donald Trump is not home at night reading the briefing books, I promise.
Some panelists argue that the ongoing criticism and negative framing of Donald Trump is not necessarily weakening his political position, and may in some cases be reinforcing it. Instead of driving voters away, they suggest the intensity of opposition can strengthen his outsider image and deepen his connection with supporters who already feel disconnected from mainstream politics. From this perspective, the criticism itself becomes part of the narrative, confirming the beliefs of his base rather than changing their minds. What some analysts find especially notable is where his support has been shifting in recent election cycles, with reported gains among groups that traditionally leaned toward the Democratic coalition, including portions of Black, Hispanic, and some women voters, though not necessarily at majority levels. They argue that even modest movement within these demographics can be significant in tightly contested races. As a result, some strategists within the Democratic Party are concerned that the current approach to opposing him may be less effective than intended and could even be contributing to the strengthening of his broader coalition.
The idea of the status quo having been successful, when you see how quickly the next generation has had a completely different life than the one before, it's hard for people to truly trust that the old guard knows what they're doing in the long run. I mean, a generation ago, they were still saying UFOs, for Christ's sakes. Well, it's now UAP, So the idea of all these things are happening. I mean, you look at it, and young people, maybe they don't have it wrong.
No, it's still the economy.
Maybe it's the others who do.
Well, it could be both. I mean, it's the economy, stupid. I've asked this question so many weeks on this show, and I can never get an answer. I just don't understand the American economy. I really don't. I don't understand how there could be so much wealth, and I pay so much in taxes, and it doesn't seem to get to the people. Like, I don't even mind doing it. Well, over half, always, way over half.
Now the conversation takes a sharper turn, and this is where it gets revealing. Maher presses Gavin Newsom with a direct question about where all the tax money is going. California remains one of the highest tax states in the country, and while residents pay a significant premium, critics argue that the results don't always match the level of spending. One of the most frequently cited examples is the high-speed rail project, which has faced years of delays, rising costs, and limited visible progress. At the same time, homelessness continues to be a major issue across the state, with growing encampments raising concerns about safety, infrastructure strain, and overall quality of life. From this perspective, the delays, cost overruns, and unresolved problems are seen not just as administrative issues, but as questions of accountability. Critics argue that when people are paying higher taxes, they expect clearer results, functioning systems, and visible improvements rather than ongoing challenges despite substantial public spending.
My God, please find somebody who can lead. Gavin Newsom is out here in California. Pulling off in his own way what I think he wants to. He's being known more for trolling Trump on his podcast or with other interviews than what he's actually doing in the state of California. They think that's leadership because they don't have it.
And Stephen A. Smith's point lands just as strongly. His argument isn't really about taxation levels, but about how public money is allocated and whether spending priorities align with everyday needs. He suggests that much of the frustration comes from investments that feel disconnected from what ordinary Americans are experiencing day to day. Instead of focusing primarily on infrastructure, public safety, and economic stability, critics argue that some officials prioritize large-scale or long-term projects that feel distant from immediate voter concerns. While this frustration isn't unique to any single party, some observers say it appears more pronounced within the Democratic Party, where spending agendas can seem broader, more ambitious, and less directly tied to visible local outcomes. Still, the core issue remains the same. Many Americans are not only frustrated about paying taxes, but about not seeing clear, measurable results in return. From that perspective, the demand is straightforward: greater accountability and more tangible improvements in everyday life. And that is why Smith's point resonates so strongly with some viewers.
I'm having with this conversation right now is that we're accusing the politicians of not knowing. They know. $39+ trillion in debt.
Yeah.
You can't pay TSA workers $1 billion over the last month, but you could spend $800 million to $2 billion a day. And somehow, some way, you find that money to finance a war. You knew you had the damn money. You knew where it was. You knew how you wanted to allocate it, and you knew you didn't want it to go to the American people. That ain't ignorance, that's viciousness. That's cruelty. That's not thinking about the American public.
And that's where the debate comes full circle. Voices like Bill Maher, and Stephen A. Smith aren't just criticizing individual figures, but pointing to what critics see as deeper structural issues within the Democratic Party. These concerns include messaging that may leave younger voters without full context, leadership choices that raise questions about experience, spending priorities that draw attention but don't always produce visible results, and political strategies aimed at Donald Trump that some believe may unintentionally strengthen his appeal. Taken together, critics argue the issue isn't a lack of ideas, but a lack of clarity, consistency, and accountability, along with a growing disconnect between the party and everyday voter concerns. From their perspective, this represents not just a short-term political challenge, but a deeper trust problem, which they warn could cost the party support if it continues unchecked.